Let's talk about if life is a game, and then we talk about the pain afterward. The life is a game. If you see what's in the mind, it's what we think is life. And there's me and you and others, and the tree and the bird and the sky and the cloud, ocean. And I'm living in that. But if you think differently, you think you're living in that. That statement is possibly just in your mind. And if you separate what's in your mind and what's down deep at the source of what's going on, and that's the relationship between human way and nature's way I mentioned before, or it's about the two universes. One is the mind or the brain, the other one is the universe itself, where the law of universe, the law of nature is taking place. So far as we see everything happening in the mind, that's very typical for most people, except in my view, we can see the mind from the other entity, call it the law of nature or the laws of universe or nature's way of how everything manifests. And if we can identify, that's the tricky word, but if we see us that identity of how the law is prevailing, that is who we are, the true self, let's call it. And the mind is just a play of thoughts in this individual entity called Kiyoshi Suzaki or Kiyo. But it's kind of like a duality. There's that canvas we paint and draw a picture going to the right and left and enjoy this and that, or suffer this and that. And if we see that as if it's a painting on the canvas, it's keep moving and changing. And as you get older, the scenery looks different. At the young age, you had certain scenery of playing with the animals or the trees or the having fun. Later, you adolescent and then adult and then family and business and others. The scenery changes, and we think we are one and the same, but we ourselves are changing because me at the age 5 is different from me right now. The essence may remain. That's the point of the nature's way, which I may talk about. But if we don't recognize the essence and just live with what we see and smell and feel and touch and joy and suffering, that happens, and that's all there is to it, then that's one way of living. But as I have been pointing that there's a source, the root of who we are, and if we break the mind not as the solid entity, but there's opening as if to connect to the source of who you are, as much as you may pray God at a certain point when you go such a suffering so you don't know what to do, hitting your head on the wall, no way out. To find the opening in that situation, you may pray for God or open up, accept everything, and suddenly you may find there's another universe, maybe briefly, like awakening out of the dream. So that's awakening. If we don't go through this awakening, we are in this game, but the game is a reality. But if you get out of it and see that entity as me, Kyo, going through this, then there's another dimension, the root dimension, the source that we may connect to. And there's a vast stillness, emptiness, silence, nothingness. It's an odd expression, and the words cannot capture. But whatever that experience is, call it awakening experience, as if find something else is functioning within me. Then we may see the connection of that source to who we are in the mind. Instead of mind is everything. And if you cannot go over the problem, you may, not a good example, but commit suicide or go wild drinking or drug or whatever the case may be. Desperate. But man's extremity is God's opportunity. As some or many may have gone through in the history, they have opened up that potential and go to the other side. The other side of the river. And some may come back to experience life as human and then go back to the nature's way, the other side. Those are the two dimensions, but the bridging the gap is the way of opening and awakening and seeing the life in a different light. Seeing the life in a different light. Everything looks new, possibly, fresh, alive, and you sense something different in that state of awakened being, aliveness, energy, connection, peace, not the peace against the suffering, but the eternal state of being, and find that as the source or true self. Yeah. So that's just a description by words and the ideas or the concept to trying to communicate to others or within myself, that I go back and forth. I use the term pendulum, or nature's way and human way, or the mind and the source, or whatever the term, or the laws of universe versus what we play in the mind. So let's give one example of what I mean by the game. This is an interesting one. I was going through the tax filing, and I'm finishing the federal, so I go to the California state, and it's a filing for the state tax. And they had a new way of processing the numbers. And I was surprised, because it's a headache to go through many papers, shuffling and moving this number from page 3 of federal, item 13, or B3 or 3B, whatever, and then move it to this column here, or the row in the California state form, and do this and that. Usually it takes, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes. But if you make a mistake like I did last year, because I didn't read carefully the line, and they have changed something, then you have to pay the penalty, and they assess that. But then I had to do the amendment, and I'm still waiting for that, tax return. I'm not sure they received it, because I have to file by the paper, the mail, instead of the electronically, because of the certain requirement. So anyway, the point is that the tax filing is a painful process in many ways. But this time, whatever the reason, they have wised up. I think the fiddler should do the same thing, that it's much easier to plug in numbers as they ask the question. And then at the end, you click something and then you see the whole form created. And all you need to do is the electronic signature and mail it, so that the whole thing may have taken 20 minutes or something instead of 1 hour or extra back and forth and sometimes mailing. So this is truly like a game, but number playing game. But I also felt that this is what the society imposes, like a bureaucracy, and then to do the federal part, because the state part I hope would be like this in future, so that I don't have to spend so much time. But the federal part is with lots of additions, like related to money laundering, that I have to add additional 5 pages, and then the another department in federal that I have to file for whatever the account information, the amount of money, whatever. So the way to handle for me is that I mentioned about waku, the sense of aliveness I feel. And when that aliveness is there, you are more open and connected to that source. That's the definition of aliveness, I call it. That you have the clarity, transparency within yourself, within myself, and the mind is clear, calm and quiet, so you can handle situation. But if you're tired, after spending 1 hour, 2 hours reading the instruction of XYZ, ABC, doing this, doing that, going back, and then go through all the manipulation of numbers, which I think a computer can do, That's kind of obvious because of my engineering background, that it's kind of stupid to go through, I think, 45 steps or something to come to some kind of a answer before you filling up. I think that was about the tax rate, tax worksheet that I have to go through, and AMT, alternative minimum tax, as an example. So anyway, in my way of handling that is not to consume myself too much, because I feel tired. My eyes may be tired, and my energy concentration may start to fade. So I stop, after spending 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever the time I can, and then go out, go for a walk, watch the sky, go swimming if I can, any of that, or gardening, or washing the dishes, all of that, or any of that. So that's the way of pendulum, back and forth, swinging from the nature's way, melting into nature, back to the human way, number crunching and using the left brain, right brain, left brain, something like that. But talking about the right and left brain, just briefly, right brain is to me like a Garden of Eden, primitive and intuitive. Left brain is more calculating, cause and effect, according to certain sequence, which is more of a linear process of how to address it. The right brain is more perceptive, much more global understanding of the situation, of what's going on. Left is more detailed one that you get dig into it. So human way, mind way is more of the playing in the digging into the process of the identity of who and what and when and how and why we behave and how to address the problem, all of that. So that's about the game. If we see it as a game, it's not too bad, and the pain may be less. So let's talk about the pain. Pain exists, even if you know that this is something I have to do, and focus and feel ridiculous in many cases. But if you are to live in this society, you may have to go through that. You can hire an accountant. In my case, I like to do it myself. It's kind of like a game in a way, and it's a puzzle. Instead of doing the crossword, I do this number crunching and logic and what goes where and why, and reflect on the last year, previous years, and see how it's different, and checking from different angles to see if that makes sense. And I make mistake, I pay the penalty or revise the, the return, things like that. But I'd rather be self-managing than having a accountant and do the transfer of the paper and the numbers and all that. Then they do the work, and I don't know what happened, but I just fill up and pay the money or something, which doesn't sound like a way I want to live. I may be prone to go through suffering because of this attitude, but to live human life, I thought this is many people do. I mean, rich people may not do it because they are wise. In my case, I don't mind doing it. I'm curious because it's stupid, but I just play the game. And like the case of California, they may have figured out how to make the life easier because so much time is wasted. And there's an industry of accounting firms to help the people, but it's a society's cost. So the pain is that if we have a light-hearted approach, it's not too bad. But because of whatever happens in the past, that we have those pain experience of not doing it right, not following the rule of the school or the young days of parents telling what to do. And that helps us, but it also binds us to be more rigid. And depending on those. But if you want to be free on your own, to realize what pain, why, and what can be done, that to me is the question. To live freely, liberated, knowing the society's way of doing things.